Hello, YouTubers. Joe here of Joe and Paul. Now, Paul's still at work. This is Saturday, March 9th. Excuse me. 2013. Now, my dad would have been 103 today. Today's his birthday. I always think of that when this year, this day rolls around every year. Well, be that as it may. As usual, very early start. Paul scampered off to work at 7:30. I got up then and carried on and cooked a little food. Turns out I had to cull a certain amount of sausage out of the refrigerator. Now, Paul brings home a lot of this stuff from work, where they've cooked too much and it's left over, and so they let the employees take it home. And I'm very grateful for that, and it's very good stuff. I mean, they buy good quality stuff down there at that place. And but inevitably, even though I keep the refrigerator compartment of the refrigerator, just about freezing, like 33. And in some cases, even below that, depending on the ventilation, sometimes some stuff freezes, and that's okay. This has been in there a while, so there was a certain amount of mold on some parts of it. So you had to sort of, these are like little sausage links. So you had to sort of split off the moldy parts and toss them off. Actually, I ended up setting aside some of them. There weren't that many. And then I tossed them over the back rail down onto the creek bank for the creatures down there so they can feast on them. And meanwhile, I was cooking some other stuff, and the non-moldy stuff, I dealt with that, so that stuff didn't go to waste. So I did that, and then I had to do some. This is continuing medical education season, as I may have pointed out, and I'm doing this. You have a series of questions based on a series of these journal articles, and I worked my way through some more of those. Actually, I'm now halfway home. Three more sessions ought to see me done with this for the rest of next year. Actually, as you do, you learn stuff. Thinking, sometimes thinking doesn't reinvent the wheel. Sometimes thinking clarifies things. And this seems to be the case this year on some of these issues that they're covering. And so that's good. That's time well spent. So the story I wish to tell today, we have, as you know, a lot of animals and stuff, and squirrels and chipmunks and hawks. And we even saw a swan, believe it or not, the other day. But, we'll save that maybe Paul can tell you about the swan. So the squirrel, we've got this portrail. It's a 2x6, and it tops the portrail. It's a treated lumber portrail. And the squirrel comes out, this gray squirrel comes out, and he sort of lays, he sort of splays himself out. He drops his front legs over the side, he drops his back legs over the side, and stretches his tail out, lays his chin down on the rail, and he suns himself. Now, I've seen him do this before. Now, I haven't seen him do it this year, but he was doing it last year several times. And when the dogs were still alive, they'd go out, and then, of course, he'd scamper off immediately. But generally, when I see him do this, I tend not to go out because that makes him leave. And I thought, well, this squirrel needs to enjoy the sun as much as I need to enjoy the sun. Which brings me to when I was a 3- and 4-year-old. And I liked to, when I was 3 and 4 years old, uh, I liked to be a squirrel. I liked squirrels. I loved squirrels. I was fascinated by squirrels. And the interesting thing about it was, there weren't any squirrels around where I grew up. Now, we were on a farm and we had trees and stuff, but we didn't see any. It's not like today where squirrels are everywhere. You had to go back in the woods, and we had a public woods that was adjacent to our place, and you'd go back and you could, walk around. My dad went back and hunted, and then as I got older, I went back and hunted there, and I just, you'd see the squirrels. I thought that was just so neat, they were doing squirrel things, they'd have nests in the trees, and they'd eat the nuts, and they'd hide the nuts, and they'd dig up the nuts, and you could watch, and I just liked them. So I like to pretend to be a squirrel. And so I would do things like I'd make like a little squirrel nest on the couch. We had these down comforters, that you could sort of roll up into like a little tube and like a little wall. You could sort of get down there and have your own little nest, a little squirrel nest. So here comes Thanksgiving, and one of the great things about when I grew up was my dad had well. At that time, his oldest brother had died. So, he was the oldest brother then, now. And then he had, my dad, his brother, and his sister, well, it was like, dad, sister, brother in terms of age. And then, widow of the older brother, and then the older married cousins and so forth. And, huge gatherings, huge amounts of food. We had like 23 people in this tiny house. And that was back when, my parents were the only people that didn't smoke in that whole crowd. It's like you couldn't see from one end of the room to the other. It's like, imagine what the health Nazis would say now. They'd be going wild, wouldn't they, hearing this. And can't say I particularly enjoyed it myself either, but still, all these people, and they're telling great stories, and we're having a good time. So anyway, so it's Thanksgiving. And my mother's just working like a navvy, just like an absolute navvy. And I took it upon myself that day to be a squirrel in the living room, and there being a squirrel. And, move, we need that couch. No, it's my nest. Well, first of all, two major errors there. One, no. I said no to a direct command. Well, that's, you just don't do that. No, you don't. I was in the wrong. So I decided to be a little bit more of a pill about this kind of stuff, and a little bit of back and forth. People are just about ready to arrive. People had arrived. And they were getting ready to sort of move in and sit down in the living room for some serious smoking and drinking. And so my mother, came in and finally, encouraged me to, my dad, this was a full concurrence of my dad, by the way. This was not in isolation here. This isn't one of these, my mom, my dad's off somewhere else stories. And he usually ran the show on this, but he let her handle this one. And so she marches me to the back door. And, it's 27 degrees. It's Thanksgiving Day. It's November. Late November. There's snow on the ground. Not a lot. There's like about this much snow on the ground. And I'm in my just street clothes, shirt sleeves. A little cotton shirt, little cotton pants. And she says, if you want to be a squirrel so much, You can just go out there and live with a squirrel. So she opens the door and puts me out on the back doorstep. Well, it's cold. But, you know, I'm a stubborn so-and-so, so I'm thinking, you know, what are my options? What are my options? What are my options? And I thought, well, I go, and we had this place that was really, we called it the shed, but it was really an old garage that nobody used as a garage. And, oh, you know, I mean, it's, anybody wanting to study, you know, airborne, vector-borne diseases off of rodents should go in there and, you know, collect air samples. So then I thought, well, you know, we got the barn out back, and the cattle are, you know, that was when we still had some cattle and kept them close to the house, and we had an area in the barn they'd come in and they could shelter in the cold. You know, we didn't have but maybe 7 or 8 cattle at that point, and it was more of a hobby for my dad, you know, for the VOAG, FFA guys to come out and work with them. And so I thought, well, you know, I've climbed up into that hayloft. I can go up there and be warm, you know, and the cattle keep the place warm. They get in there, their body heat. And I actually went so far as to go out to the barn and climb up into the hayloft. And then, you know, so I was kind of burrowing around. I realized, you know, there's probably about as many mice up in that hayloft as there are out there in that so-called garage, you know, and plus, there are holes in that floor I hadn't been aware of before, you know. I mean, you know, it concentrates your attention, you know. So I'm thinking, well, this just is not a reasonable option on my part. So I backed my way down the ladder. You know, of course, I'm 4 years old, so I mean, you know, the rungs are, you know, so this was, you know, holding on like grim death to each rung. I got that. So, you know, my mother put me out the back door, so I scampered around to the front of the house, you know, because the guests, you know, we rarely used the front door, but the guests were coming in the front door. And so I went up to the front door and I knocked. And my mother comes over and she opens the door. She says, "Yes." And I said, "Oh," she says, "Yes, what do you want?" And I said, "I don't want to be a squirrel anymore." And you know what? I never was after that. So there it is, YouTubers. Bye-bye now.